Hello, test, test, check, check, audio levels. Hey there, I'm Keith, and I've been flying the Mavic 3 Classic for a little while now, and I've been writing down all of the things that I really have been enjoying or disliking about this drone. And I have not enough to make a full review out of it, but I definitely have a lot of strong opinions about this drone so far. So just jumping straight into it, the first thing I wrote down is the colors are awesome. They are neutral, but they also still can be color graded. The bit depth of the 12-bit RAW is something that I still need to push a little farther in post-production. I don't really know the nuances of the footage yet, but just getting stuff straight off of this card, I've been shooting in normal and D-Log, but I haven't really touched HLG yet. But the D-Log footage is really fun to grade, and the natural normal picture profile is actually really nice colors to work with. I've actually shipped a couple of things without even touching the color grade at all, and just making like a very minor exposure change or something if I needed to. I was using the Mini 3 Pro before this to make some videos for this channel, and coming from the Mini 3 Pro, I was pretty used to that drone, and then flying this thing was like a complete night and day difference. Whenever I pulled footage straight off of the card, even in their natural picture profiles, it was like seeing color again for the first time after using this camera compared to the Mini 3 Pro. The Mini 3 Pro is still a great drone, but they're just for different markets, I think. The next thing I wrote down was the 24mm full frame equivalent lens is a nice focal length for landscapes without being too wide, but you can still zoom in with this drone a little bit and get some nice parallax. I understand that the classic version doesn't have the telephoto lens like the Mavic 3 does, but you can still zoom in and get some pretty decent results. And the next thing I wrote down was the 5.1 video has plenty of resolution and you can reframe in post. I have actually used the 5.1 and edited in a 4K timeline and had a little bit of room to work with. Honestly, it's not a huge amount of room, but if you need to just zoom in on something a little bit more without any quality loss in a 4K timeline and you're shooting in 5.1K, it's hard to argue with that to have more resolution. And if you want it to just look a little sharper, you can just downscale it to the 4K timeline and it does look really nice and crisp. The next thing I wrote down, and this was actually like, I was in my office, I wasn't even in the field for this one, but I said, this is not a huge improvement over the Mavic 3, but if you don't need a tighter camera, you're saving a lot of money by not buying features you don't need. A lot of people were confused when the Mavic 3 Classic came out, but I would say if you have a Mavic 3, are you really using that telephoto lens? I'm not saying the Mavic 3 was maybe a bad purchase, but if you put these two side by side and you're saying, well, I really don't find myself using that other lens, do I really need to pay for it? I would say that this is a very approachable price point for a lot of different people that don't need to spend extra money for extra features. All that rant to say, this drone, if you are working to pay it off, this drone will actually pay for itself very quickly compared to those higher end drones like the Mavic 3 Cine. Those have their place, but make sure that you actually need that when you're buying it. My clients didn't need that. They weren't asking for it. So it would take me longer to pay that off. And if I was trying to pay that drone off, I could be buying more lenses or more cameras. So there's kind of like an opportunity cost to having super high-end gear to where it will take longer to pay back. That's just a quick bullet note I wrote down. This is kind of the sweet spot for prosumers that are working and want to quickly pay their gear off and get into profits. Sensors and APAS 5 make me more confident about automated flight modes. This is something that I really enjoy having on DJI drones especially. I was flying some Autel drones recently and they didn't have the same amount of safety features and sensors, and the specs just weren't the same as these tried and true DJI drones. They just had more time to really refine their product line, and it does show because all of these features, I can flip it into, if I want to come home and just hit return to home, I'm confident this drone will actually sense obstacles and avoid them and come home with appropriate battery levels left. So the amount of safety features on these is something that I was very, very happy with. The next thing I said, and this is the same thing I said about the Mini 3 Pro, is that this controller is an absolute must if you are ordering this drone and you don't want to be putting your phone inside of that ratchet style remote. There's nothing wrong with that remote, and I still fly with my phone using my Air 2S, but I found myself using my Mini 3 Pro more when I had this screen. Even though the drone wasn't as good quality, it was really simple to get up and running. And now that the Mavic 3 has this controller, I absolutely love flying with this because I don't have to get my phone out, or, you know, if someone calls me in the middle of a flight and I need to take the call, I always was like, I just have to not respond to this person and then come home, land the drone, then call them back. And it was just always kind of a annoying thing to put my phone in something else. It sounds silly, but having a dedicated device for flying is really nice. One thing that I dislike about this controller, however, is that I was recently flying in Cleveland and they have a Lance like automated authorization under 300 feet in the particular area I was flying in. And when I was flying my Air 2S, I would do this and it would just work. So I really kind of took that for granted, but you have to have an internet connection to accept some of those prompts and input the code. So I actually had to hotspot from my phone to my controller to get that authorization to go through. It really wasn't that hard of a process. But if you're going to be flying in a lot of places where you need to get authorization, it could kind of negate any kind of time savings using this as a dedicated device, other than the unlock codes and features that your phone gives you baked in. Now that my phone and this device are linked, it's a very quick process to get those authorization codes, but that is one thing to kind of keep in mind. If you're only buying this to save time, but you fly in a lot of places where you have to unlock your region, maybe think about those two things before you buy this controller. Even that being said, I still like this controller just for that dedicated screen. The next bullet point is battery life is great. I've been really happy with this, and again, I didn't buy the Fly More kit. I'm probably going to end up buying it just because I love flying this drone so much, but I didn't buy it for this drone, and I've been going places and flying and coming home before the battery is even out because I get all the shots that I need. And if I'm going to the next location, I can just plug this in with my USB-C power bank and it's charged up by the time I get to the next place I want to go and fly. So I've been making one battery work, but for actually, like, once I get in the rhythm of taking more jobs with this drone exclusively, I'll need that Fly More kit. But if you're only using this for leisure, really that 46 minute, I wish hour, but that 46 minutes of flight time is actually really nice to have. And I mean, it's like every bit of 40 minutes when you're whipping it around in my testing, unless it's really crazy wind conditions, then I haven't really tested then, but that will be something I'm testing for future videos, so be sure to check back then. The next one I have is cruise control is nice, but automated flight modes are better in my opinion. Right off the bat, cruise control is fun if you just want to focus on your shots, but you always have to be flying and moving. You can cancel out of it, but I think the automated flight modes, if you want to do like master shots and just get a couple of shots quickly, that's a great way to do it in an automated fashion. But if you want to just find something and, do an orbit around it, you can just active track it and fly around and do whatever shots that you need to do. That really, for me, takes over the cruise control. I don't tend to just go and fly in one direction for like 10 minutes, unless I'm maybe like making a hyperlapse or something. But again, there's automated modes for hyperlapses. So this is a confusing feature for me. It's not something that I would use. I've read people online and watched YouTube videos of people that really enjoy this mode, but for me, I just find it a little bit confusing for my style of flying. Speaking of active track though, the next thing I wrote down was active track feels reliable when you can activate it. I was shooting 4K 60 in low light and the drone would begin to track objects but would lose it if there wasn't enough contrast or the area was too dark. I remember for this shoot, I was shooting at civil twilight and I was using the light mode. or the low light mode, and it was having trouble tracking in a building that looked similar to other buildings when I was filming in Cleveland. So I understand that the drone probably couldn't pick out what I was exactly trying to active track with all of the textures and patterns looking the same, because they were also kind of far away. But also, that's the only time that I've tried to active track something in low light, and it just didn't work. To be fair, I was using D-Log in 4K 60, or it could be an active track issue, but I wrote down, I assume it's a mixture of all of them, and I will be testing this out a little bit more in the future to find out how to active track things that look similar in low light. I think that'll be an interesting video. That'll require a lot of testing, so be sure to check back for that one as well. The next bullet point I wrote down is just cine mode is nice. I really enjoy flying very close to objects very slowly, and cine mode is something that I've really enjoyed on this drone. I watched a YouTube short by Philip Bloom, and he was really excited that you can now do 1 meter per second. I think that's like 2.5 miles per hour, which that cine mode and flying very slow and close to something is a great way to almost look like you're getting a very smooth gimbal shot, but then you can make it look like an impossible gimbal shot and go over a bridge or a cliff or anything, and it looks really nice with the very controlled movements, especially when you are doing like an impossible shot with this camera. So yeah, true, cine mode is nice. Again, going back to what I was talking about earlier, I was flying the Mini 3 Pro a lot, and then I went to this drone, and it was this. I wrote this down after I was made that transition. This drone handles the wind much better than the Mini 3 Pro. It feels slightly more solid than the Air 2S, but it's still not immune to blowing around in high winds if you're flying close to objects. So when I wrote this, I remember I took the Mavic 3 Classic to a pier locally to my house that I always take all of my drones. It's a kind of a nice like initial first test flight, and I was in cine mode and I was flying very slow and close to a pier, and there's a bench, but it was really windy and I could see the drone moving back and forth, but the drone looked pretty stable, but you can still see it bobbing back and forth over time. So even though this drone is beefier than the Air 2S and especially the Mini 3 Pro, it's still not immune to having any kind of those kind of bobbing back and forth when it is pretty windy. If you're close to objects, like I wrote down there, you can really notice it a lot more. So if you're going to be flying in wind, I always try to fly a little bit farther away from things, because a little bit of, the drone bobbing back and forth, if you're really far away, doesn't really translate to the image. But if you're flying like, 5 feet above something and the drone moves a little bit to the left or the right, that's really going to translate more to the overall footage. So if you're flying, in my testing so far, if you're flying in cine mode close to things, make sure there is little to no wind around. And this next dislike I wrote down every single time I came back in my office. Since I don't have the Flymore kit yet, I had to charge my Mavic 3 Classic with this USB-C cable, but I would, for some reason, always come in, plug the drone in to start charging it, but you can't remove this SD card if you're charging your drone at the same time. So I had to remove the cable, take the card out, and then put the cable back in. This is a very small problem, but it's something that I ran into, and it is an also minor annoyance that will be solved by specifically the Flymore kit and that charging hub. So I really look forward to having that, not only for the extra batteries, but that charging hub is going to be very nice. So these are some of my initial impressions of the Mavic 3 Classic. I have been really enjoying this drone, especially coming from my reviews of the Mini 3 Pro, which is also another great drone, but they just have two different use cases, I think. This is a very solid drone with a great camera and nice colors straight out of the camera that you don't really have to tweak, but you still can tweak them with that D-Log and really kind of push your color grade in a creative direction. I haven't messed around with HLG, but I really do plan on digging deep into the different profiles and making LUTs and corrections and then creative LUTs for these. So also be sure to check back for that video in the future. Let me know if you like these kind of like first impressions, unscripted, kind of casual videos. It's kind of different from the very scripted videos that I do for tech reviews. So let me know in the comments down below if you enjoy that. And thank you guys for sticking around to the end, and I'll see you in the next one.